When it rains, it pours. More Lockhart info is on the horizon. What's up, everybody? Brad here, and well, it's been an interesting week because on Monday of this week, before all this hoopla had started, I wrote, while Phil Spencer has confirmed that dev kits are being shipped out, he recently dodged a question about Lockhart still being alive. And here's the thing. For a company that is only talking about one console, Scarlet, I have heard from quite a few insiders who are familiar with Lockhart, and they don't believe the project is dead. So that was on Monday. There's also a video about it. But I'm hearing from too many different independent sources that Lockhart is still a thing, and I don't know why that just changed. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the PlayStation 5 does not want to talk about Lockhart either. And you can go all watch that and whatever. Which brings us to today, because after I published that, a bunch of other sources came out of the woodwork and said, "Hey, we also don't think it's dead either." That included Kotaku, citing sources with their own people, are saying that, hey, they talked to some game developers and said, yep, Lockhart's still a thing. And then The Verge piled on top of that and said, yep, still a thing. All started by what I wrote after on Monday. And so here's the thing. Rumor world is a little dicey because if we look at the timeline of Lockhart, I first wrote about Lockhart on December 17th, 2018 as it being a secondary kind of lower powered console to the Anaconda family. Then we jumped to E3 2019, where Phil Spencer made it pretty clear that he thought that, hey, we are going to be doing a one console strategy, and that's what it sounded like from all the interviews. It's like Scarlet is the focus, Lockhart wasn't a thing. And other publications like Digital Foundry and candidly myself were hearing from developers that Lockhart was kind of being a problem, and because it was lower power, that people were writing games for that lower power and scaling up rather than writing for games for the higher version like the Scarlet console and scaling down to Lockhart. And so there was a bit of much confusion for about a month or so, because in July of 2019, I started hearing that, hey, actually that console's not dead. I said I was calling it the cloud console because I wasn't quite sure the whole narrative. The rumor world is a messy place. It's not there's some clear-cut path to victory. It's you get information from multiple sides and you try to blend it all together to figure out what the actual story arc is here for the consoles. And so around July, I was beginning to hear that, hey, it actually kind of maybe wasn't really dead. There was something going on still with that lower tiered console that sat below Scarlet, which then brings us up to Monday. And after I've been talking with, well, a lot of people actually, more than I'd be willing to say publicly about Lockhart, the conclusion was that, hey, this thing is still, it's still coming, or it's still in development and still part of the go-to-market strategy at this time and place. And then after I wrote it up just kind of haphazardly, part of a PS4 or PS5 dev kit post, because I didn't think it was huge news. I just thought that this thing was still kind of just floating and bobbing around, and then everybody else piled on top and says, hey, this is still coming out. So because myself, I'm hearing it, and multiple others are hearing it, it's hard to discount that how far along this project actually is. And so Kotaku, according to their sources, say it's going to be, one person put it in this, I don't think I agree with this, PlayStation 4 Pro in terms of graphical power. The reason why I say I don't necessarily agree with it, the graphical portion could be relatively close, but graphical horsepower is way different than total system horsepower. So don't get too caught up in like that specific comparison. Also, we know that things like faster SSDs are going to be there. It's going to be running on AMD's new Zen architecture, or updated Zen architecture, I should say. And so don't get too caught up in that. I think some people are going to run to the hills with that, and they're going to be a little disappointed when this thing actually launches, because it's going to be, I believe, more powerful than the PS4 Pro. That is my current understanding. Now the question becomes, why in the heck should Microsoft actually make a Lockhart console? Because they already have the Xbox One X, which does 4K gaming, and that is absolutely a valid thought. Here's the reason why I believe that Microsoft is going this route. The processor that is in the Xbox One X or the S or the original Xbox is a Jaguar core from AMD, but that thing is old. It is more than several years old. I mean, it might be close to a decade old by the time Scarlet launches. It is not an efficient chip anymore. It is missing a lot of the newer security features and just optimizations and efficiencies that you get with a smaller nanometer core size or die size. So there's a lot of reasons why they should, primarily because they need to get onto a standard chipset, which I believe Lockhart and Anaconda are going to use the same chipset. It's just going to be scaled, or effectively the Anaconda will be a more powerful version. Just think sort of how like Intel does i3 to i7. Think ballpark roughly that type of a scenario. And so it makes more sense for Microsoft and AMD to have one chip for both consoles, and it's just more efficient. And Microsoft is going to probably gain from an efficiencies of scale thing here because they're going to be producing one chip for both consoles. I know there's some overlap with the Xbox One X in terms of performance and the capabilities and features, but trust me, this is the right approach for Microsoft. It's going to make things easier rather than still trying to juggle having that Jaguar core being produced and in devices that are shipping as brand new for the next generation. I mean, can you really expect Microsoft to export the Xbox One X for the life of Scarlett? That would be crazy for them to still produce that console for that length of time. And so that's where Lockhart fits in. It makes it easier. It's less messy. It's one chip. It's one roughly the same graphics processor. It's roughly just one console, just scaled differently, which makes it easier for Microsoft from a development perspective, a management perspective, and a cost perspective. And so that is why they would do that. And so, yeah. And then the other kind of thing is here is like, did Microsoft try to play the media? Did they? I mean, they've done this before. Did they try to craft the narrative that Lockhart wasn't still a thing? And then everybody kind of ran with it because, hey, if Microsoft is saying it, they're not going to lie to us. And if you look carefully, they didn't really lie. They didn't really not say it wasn't happening. They just said that Scarlett is the focus. And this is just the world of talking about a console release before it's even close to market. I mean, again, we are still, I would say, about 11 months away. I would expect that there's going to be a reveal event, much like they have done previously with previous generation Xbox consoles. Before E3, Microsoft always has an event, and that is the natural place to talk much more in detail. Considering that they've already started to talk about it at the past 2 E3s, that seems like the natural place around that timeline for Microsoft to pull back the curtains and talk in depth about their next generation console. And so, yeah, Lockhart, it's going to be an interesting approach, and I still think it's the right approach. And there's going to be an angle for XCloud into all this. Do not discount what XCloud is and what it can bring to these consoles. I still believe that there's part of the narrative with XCloud that we haven't quite heard yet. Remember how Crackdown 3, you can do that online gaming play within the cloud and that kind of stuff. I think we're going to see some more of that. I think Microsoft is trying to push some of that and expand and enhance those capabilities because that is a true differentiator that they can offer their multiplayer developers. And now you might be saying, well, why would somebody like EA or whatever go that route? I don't know if EA would necessarily. They might be a little more cautious, but remember, Microsoft has more than a handful of in-house development shops who can take advantage of that stuff relatively easily because they have first-party support, because they are a first-party game development shop. And so I don't quite know how that all is going to play into if they'd even mention xCloud, but Microsoft likes to think of xCloud as a product in the cloud, not just purely as a game streaming service at this time. I'm curious to see how Microsoft expands that marketing and branding over time, but we'll watch and keep our eyes peeled on things like that. But what you need to know about Lockhart is right now it still appears to be on the agenda. Too many people are hearing that it has moved forward, that it is coming. The one other thing is I heard that it was initially designed for the marketing was going to be 1080p for Lockhart, and Scarlett was going to be 4K, which makes sense because those are the most popular TV resolutions. Kotaku actually said 1440p, which is very likely could, although I don't know how many people play Xbox consoles on PC monitors all the time. I know actually I do as well, but my primary machine or primary display is a TV, but 1440p, hey, I don't think anyone's going to be upset if it does 1440p at 60 frames per second, and then you have a 4K 60 frames per second with Scarlett. So there you go, guys. Interesting times ahead. The one thing that I will point out, though, and it sounds like the development kit for Sony has been out for a lot longer than Microsoft has. Microsoft has been holding theirs back, it seems, at least at this time, from I should say some third-party development shops. It sounds like Sony has got theirs out early. Microsoft has been a little bit later. We will see how that plays out and if it's actually true here in the near future. But for now, guys, that's what I'm hearing. There's a few other details which we'll talk about later, and we'll catch all of you right back here next time.